welcome to our Youth Parliament, joint initiative of the Times of India and Times Now. There has been a rigorous selection process behind getting the best of our youth, the most articulate youth, to represent their voice today. The idea of the Youth Parliament is very simple: to get the youth of this country into a direct, open conversation with the people who frame policies and the people who matter. There are three separate youth parliaments which have been organized by the Times of India and Times Now. One deals with politics, the other deals with economics, and the third will deal with foreign policy and strategic affairs. In this youth parliament, this is the way we've divided it. There are 8 participants in all. There are 4 participants from what we call the establishment, those who are players in the present political environment. They may not necessarily be all politicians, but they already have a say in decision making. And then there are 4 youth participants who we hope, expect, and genuinely believe will be the future of India. These participants will take on the establishment across a motion which is decided by the House. The motion we are putting up, and before I introduce our participants today, let me welcome first Shankar Raghuraman, who is a co-moderator with me in this special youth parliament. Shankar is a fantastic political analyst, number cruncher, and he's a senior editor for the Times of India. Shankar, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 8 participants today. The motion which we are putting to the floor is this: the political class of India has failed to meet the aspirations of India's youth. It's a straightforward motion. It will be not easy for those who are against the motion to have their say heard and their voice carried in this House, but they will have a full and equal opportunity as those who will be on the treasury benches of this particular debate. I will now introduce the members of our first youth parliament, and speaking for the motion is well-known social and political activist, former IPS officer, one of the best-known police officers this country has had, Magsaysay Award winner, Dr. Kiran Bedi. Thank you very much. Thank you. And speaking against the motion is Mr. Sachin Pilot, who's a union minister, and today will face a tough time fighting this motion. Sachin, you have been grim through the initial part of the proceedings. I hope you will smile as the proceedings move on. All the very best. Sachin Pilot, one of the young leaders of the Congress party. As they say, the youth brigade in the Congress party, squaring off with the youth of this country. This should be interesting. Let me introduce our first panelist who is speaking for the motion today, Ashay Sahai. He will be speaking at number 5, and I'll give the numbers as we move on. Ashay Sahai is 24-year-old, and he is from the Rashtriya Vidyalaya College of Engineering in Bangalore, and he's speaking for the motion. Ashay Sahai, look forward to your participation. Let's give a big round to our youth panelists. And also speaking against the motion today is Fawaz Shaheen, and Fawaz is 22 years old. He's from the Aligarh Muslim University, and he is defending the political class today, which is a brave thing to do, Fawaz, let me tell you. All the very best. As they used to say when I was in college and debating, Fawaz, there is no better challenge than defending the indefensible, but please do not feel that I have any bias towards this subject.
We have absolute confidence.
Thank you very much. And somebody who we all know we have great respect for, a person who psephology has lost to the political space. Dr. Yogendra Yadav of the Aam Aadmi Party is speaking for the motion today. He is a present-day politician. He's a present-day politician who has no qualms in saying that the political class which he is a part of today has failed to meet the aspirations of India's youth. Yogendra Yadav, all the very best to you. Now, speaking against the motion today is, from our youth panelists, is Vipul Nanda. And he's 26 years old. Vipul is from the National Law School of India University in Bangalore. And Vipul, we hope you'll bring both legal and political insights into this debate. Look forward to hearing from you, Vipul. Excellent. Let's have a good debate today. Let's have an open debate. And I'd like the audience to be as participative as possible in the course of our debate today. Now, we also have today speaking for the motion, we have Ashwin, and Ashwin is from, he's 20-year-old. Let's give him a big round of applause because he's the youngest of our participants today. All of 20 years old. From Loyola College, Chennai, I wish you the best, Ashwin. May the youngest and the best voice win. And don't think I'm biased again. I'm equally biased on both sides.
At least this time it's on my side.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic to be on the side of India's youth. And last but not the least, Harsimrat Kaur Badal is one of the younger members of parliament of our Lok Sabha, and those who've heard her speak representing the Shiromani Akali Dal would know she is by far one of the most articulate, and if I may say so, Ms. Badal, you're also one of the most aggressive speakers, so you will have to bring all your aggression to use today to speak against the motion. Harsimrat Kaur Badal, Member of Parliament for the Shiromani Akali Dal. Introductions done? Well, now that the introductions are done, I'll just spend a very little time going through the way we'll format the debate. And I believe that the best debate is unstructured, but we'll bring a little format to it so that before we go into the open debate round, we'll have a little format to it. The format is very simple. Each of our initial participants, and we'll go in a specific order, with a youth participant speaking for the motion, youth participant speaking against the motion, and then for and against and for and against. We will have 8 speakers come on. I will not reveal who's coming on when, so that there is an element of surprise when someone is asked to speak. Just 3 things without trying to sound pedantic or preachy. Freshness in a debate is important. We hope that participants will be responding to each other rather than just reading from what they have prepared. Interjections will be fantastic and welcome and appreciated. Seeking of clarifications to specific points which one speaker or the other has articulated will add to the quality of the debate. And Shankar, if you'd like to add any before we begin the round. Shankar.
I just hope that we don't have to periodically get up and say we are on our feet, as tends to happen in Parliament very often. And to the youth participants here, I would say this is your chance. This is your chance to come up against the very best, people who've been chosen by lakhs to be where they are. So go for it.
Our first speaker. Fantastic. Our first speaker who is introducing the motion that the political class of India has failed to meet the aspirations of India's youth will be Ashwin from Loyola College, Chennai. 3 minutes for your opening remarks. Ashwin, floor is yours.
So the motion before the House is the Indian political class has failed to meet the aspirations of the youth. Now, to start with, I concede to the fact that politics as such is a very difficult arena to enter. Not everybody shine in it, right? And in no way am I demeaning the stature of politics. But what I'm arguing for is that politics, the status of which has been demeaned, this sacred stance, this sacred activity has been demeaned by the existing politicians. Right? Now, before I go about and explain what aspirations have failed, I'll describe what these aspirations are in the first place. Now, there is a varied aspiration across the country because a student studying in Bihar might just have the aspiration to find his next meal on the table, while I, a middle class, might just want to buy myself a car after I start working. But on the other hand, there is this upper class elite student who's just graduated, wants to go to Oxford for his further studies. So that apart, the difference in aspirations apart, there are a few basic things which I call the least common denominator that should be addressed to in the first place, right? This includes education, this includes employment, and this includes dignity of life. Now, education, we all know the importance of education. If there is some way we can improve our stature and contribute best to the surroundings around us and the country as such, education is the only way out. It's an investment that reaps benefits all through the nation, and this is a common known fact. Employment. Now, employment is something that should be on the top of agenda of the government, because considering the amount of working people that we have in our country, this is a demographic dividend, right? 60 million people are below the age group of 40. Now, employment should be on top of the government's agenda is what I'm arguing for. Dignity of life. Now, we see that a lot of people are discriminated at their workplaces irrespective of their qualification, right? If I am someone from the Dalit class and I'm working in an MNC, which we are not seeing today, I will still be assumed to have an inferior status. Now, why this inferior status at all in the first place, right? Now, to talk about the failures in these aspects of education, employment, and dignity of life, where has education got in the country? 1 out of every 4 people is uneducated in this country. I'm pretty sure people in this room are ignored. Second, employment. Now, my brother has finished his class 10 and he studied his diploma and he studied further for 6 years because he did not find a job opportunity until then. But now he's serving burgers at McDonald's. Now he studied engineering only so that he could use this talent of his, this knowledge of his to something that could be of a related sector. But now I'm not demeaning the status of someone who serves burgers at McDonald's. It's as prestigious as someone who works in the construction. But what did my brother study for in the first place? So this skill set mismatch is something that is very implorable in our country. Right? Now, where is dignity? Now, we see a lot of discrimination within the workplace. Women are treated inferior to men. Now, with all due respect to everyone around there who have equal respect for gender, let me ask you, what is the scene of women in the country today, right? So now the problem in the political class is dealing with these aspirations. But the first step is identifying these aspirations. Once you do not, only if you identify these aspirations can you deal with them. But the political class's failure in identifying these aspirations is where they're flawed in the first place. Now, why haven't they been able to identify? The average age of an Indian is 23 years old today. The average age of cabinet minister is 65. This jarring gap of 42 years is enough to tell you about the differences in what we expect out of the system and what the system is giving to us, if anything is given to us at all. Right? Now, the recent scene of criminalization in politics has gotten much light to. Now, let me ask the government as to on what grounds did they dare to go up and pose an ordinance in the first place? Now, this is a clearly one-sided debate, right? Because we don't see any defense in defending this ordinance, right? Why didn't the government pass an ordinance for the Jan Lokpal bill? Why didn't the government pass an ordinance for the women's rights bill? Now, this clearly shows that the loyalty to their political class is overtaking our representation in the parliament. And this demographic dividend that I'm talking about, 60% of the population being below the working age group of 40, might just end up as a demographic disaster. If we do not tap the talent of today's youth, which is the biggest talent that exists today, I think we will be regretting 50 years down the line. We will not be able to correct this. Now today, the onus on the government is to identify the ability to churn this huge population as a dividend and not end up as a disaster. Thus, I rest my case. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. It's a great opening comment, Ashwin. Well done. Thank you very much. Now, more than 50% of Indians are below 35 years of age. And the other interesting statistic I find is that 74% of politicians who have criminal backgrounds get the tickets back again by their parties. So they are put in the fray once again. I think that tells a lot. And as you have said, statistics do reveal a lot sometimes. Thanks very much. Fawaz Shaheen is our next speaker. We are getting youth speakers from both sides, and he's from Aligarh Muslim University speaking against the motion. Fawaz, the floor is yours. You can respond to Ashwin on any of the points he's made.
Thank you, Arnab. I think before going further into the debate, what we need to analyze is the real meaning of this phrase, aspirations of the youth. Now, Ashwin has been talking about the least common denominators, but let's face it, I mean, employability for you and me may not mean the same thing as employability for the chotu at the nearest dhaba. And so basically what we need to understand is that the youth is not this homogeneous, monolithic block, and there's no common, unified list of aspirations which we can, work on and then go after the political class with that. There is, in fact, a diversity within the youth. The youth form different parts. The youth come from different sections of the society. And therefore, there is also a heterogeneity of aspirations. And these aspirations are something that we are often not ready to understand. I mean, for example, we all get very irritated by these, trouble-making tribals in Odisha who are not allowing Vedanta to mine for bauxite in the Niyamgiri hills. What we do not understand is that they've been living there for hundreds of years and they have their own very genuine aspirations with regard to what should happen in those hills, with regard to any mining that should happen in those hills. Or, for instance, how the entire issue of Jal Jangal Jameen, the assertion of rights by the youth belonging to rural and tribal areas is something that we are very disconnected with and that we don't tend to understand. And I mean, look at the treatment we give to the northeastern youth. I mean, how many of us are concerned that Irom Sharmila is going to complete 13 years of hunger in a simple aspiration for justice? And for that matter, let's look at how we ignore the fear of racial profiling that Muslim youths feel today. I mean, the very fact that me, a very mainstream, middle-class Muslim youth, my parents don't allow me to travel on a national holiday because they're afraid something bad might happen to me because of my Muslim name. So these are things that the problem of aspirations, the frustration of aspirations, is something that has a lot to do with the social incoherence which is present before us today. The gap of understanding between different sections of the society and therefore between different sections of the youth. I mean, apart from a very elite class, how many people celebrate festivals together today? Why is this greater ghettoization between different communities? So this is leading to a very incoherent social functioning, which is that this social crisis is spilling over into the political scenario. And here I would like to say we are making a very, very big mistake by drawing this sharp differentiation between the political class and everybody else, between the political class and the youth. Because why do we not own up? Why do we not realize that we are all part of the politics? I mean, we have Professor Yogendra Yadav here. You just called him, now he's part of the political class. It's not as if suddenly Professor Yadav one day decided that I want to become a politician. The fact of the matter is, throughout his life, his entire academics, his entire civil activism has been geared towards a certain kind of politics. Similarly, the activities of an NGO or a human rights organization, or for that matter, a corporate firm, are all geared towards a certain kind of politics. Why do we not realize that? Why do we tend to disassociate ourselves from the political class and say these are some sort of an alien entity who've been installed before us? The apathy in the youth, the way student unions have become irrelevant, the way we refuse to come to the streets for something that we believe in, is something that is most appalling and most dangerous. I mean, the recent case of the Delhi gang rape and the way students got involved is a very rare example of how we get up for something that we truly believe in. And that is something that we need to look for. That is something we need to start owning up, taking responsibility, and start saying that the political class is all of us. We live in a democracy, and it's the job of all of us to not just choose people who will be connectors between power and people and power,
yes,
but to become the connect between people and power. That's all I have to say for now.
Fawaz, well argued. You make a point here, and I want Kiran Bedi, who's going to be our next speaker, to respond to that point, that the point that you make is very interestingly articulated. What you're saying is that politicians are only the symptom of the social malaise at best, and therefore you make a very controversial point, Fawaz, and I like controversy. You are making a point that politicians are the favorite whipping boys, but they don't deserve
the politician syndrome.
Have I understood you correctly?
Yeah, I am highlighting the blame the politician syndrome we tend to have.
I think it's just the right point in this debate to throw the floor to our third speaker speaking for the motion, Dr. Kiran Bedi. You have 3 minutes to argue back.
If I would take his 3 points while he spoke were, number one, that there is no common aspiration as far as quality of life is concerned. To my mind, quality of life is a common aspiration. The pattern may change. The extent may change. It may have that kind of variety. But the quality of life, basic quality of life, I think is everyone's aspiration. Number one. This is my first rebuttal. My second rebuttal would be, he talked about the jungle, jungle and zameen. This is exactly what has been bled by the politicians. It's been bled. Jal has been bled, jungle has been bled, zameen has been bled. You've had politicians who've been encroaching on the land, and you've had politicians who've been bleeding it by emptying the exchequer. Otherwise, you would not have had those hundreds of those districts in Nakshal areas. And this has happened over the years. And the ball, therefore, is in. This is exactly what has been caused by the politicians. And third, it is the same political class which is the bleeding which has been actually pleading class. So they are actually a BPL class which has been bleeding the exchequer, jungle and zameen. They've been pleading to lead. It's pleading to lead. It's a BPL class which has been bleeding, which has been pleading, and which has been wanting to lead. Now, where did it fail in leading, to my mind, is I'm a former public servant. They failed to lead even the public servants. While they're pleading to get the votes, they failed miserably to lead the bureaucracy as well. Actually, they've abused the bureaucracy, like you've seen the fodder case. What has happened? It's a nexus between the politicians and the bureaucrats that you have been signing up all false bills. And that is why bureaucrats and politicians today are going to be convicted for many, many years, and they're already in jail. So therefore, I would say the politicians failed to lead either the people who they bled and who they pleaded for votes, as well as lead the bureaucracy who was accountable to them. So I would therefore rebut this, that the failure goes back to the politicians who bled, who pleaded, and who led miserably.
Kiran Bedi, thank you very much. Forceful argument as usual. She makes a case that this is the political class which has bled this country, and therefore the disaffection, I presume, which the youth experiences, or the disenchantment that they experience with the body politic, is because of their insensitivity. It's the right time to get in Congress Party's Sachin Pilot, who's the minister in the Manmohan Singh cabinet, to respond to the points that Kiran Bedi has made on the subject today. Against the motion, Sachin.
Well, first of all, I think it's the topic of discussion today is about the political class not living up to the expectations of young people in India. What this nation represents is much more than youth. There is multiple facets to our society. But just one point before I take on the main debating issues. Now, I respect Dr. Bedi very much, and I think she's very passionate when she makes certain statements. But oftentimes I've seen it is our officers and our bureaucrats and our officials who seem to find a voice little after they retire. But while they're working, I don't see the kind of response that should be coming from the people who are actually signing on files. And then when the day has gone by, it's easy to point fingers and find faults. But I think the ultimate responsibility lies with the political class. But the system comprises of more than just politicians. There are judicial officers, there are bureaucrats, there are police officials, there are administrations, there are a whole lot of stakeholders which ultimately reflect India's functionality. It's quite easy to blame politicians, as you said, Arnab, even though you said you're not biased, but I think your statements were quite clear that the ultimate buck stops with the politician. And I'm the last one to shrug responsibility. But I would like the House to consider the point that this nation is where it is today. And for all the ills that we can illustrate today and point fingers and find faults with the politicians, the last 6.5 decades have some glorious moments to it. The direction, the way the country has moved forward, the way we are today, the kinds of economic opportunity. Ashwin's point was primarily related to amount of economic opportunity our young people are able to get or not get today. Do not forget there are many countries around the world where there have been revolutions, there have been governments toppled, but our democracy, because of the thinking of our politicians, we may have difference of opinion. Me and Harsimrat have come from different political parties, but there are certain issues that are sacrosanct to our system. Our faith in a democracy, our faith in our system, however you may criticize it, ultimately for the kind of country that we live in, the scale, scope, depth, diversity, large nation that we are, the fact that we've kept ourselves together is because of the political leadership. This country would have collapsed 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But for all that we criticize our political class, me included, I think we have done a seminal job in keeping the lamp of democracy burning, the faith of people every 5 years they go out and vote and elect or re-elect or reject people. That system has sustained in the subcontinent only in India. Look around our neighborhood. There's not one single country that has the capacity to absorb the kind of aberration that we have in our system. So young people in India today have a voice. The fact that we're having a youth parliament today, 2013, didn't have this 25 years ago. It's because young people have found a voice. They have been able to come out and express themselves. Democracy is not about getting elected to positions of power. Democracy is about being involved in the process, asking questions, making people accountable, taking them to task. This sort of response, because of the technology, because of the awareness that we have today, has come because the country has moved forward. 25 years ago, India was not in a position to ask these tough questions. Today, the empowerment, the enlightenment, the awareness, the curiosity, the creativity, the imagination of young people has captured everyone. And I think we must pay a tribute to our young people. Politicians, of course, are a reflection of our society. No politician is imported from the moon. They're from the same gullies, same mohalla, same universities, and convicted or not convicted, these people get elected. Who elects them? We all elect them. So let's have a reflection within ourselves and see how we to improve our own societal values so that we get a much better political class. I'm an optimist. And I believe moving forward, if young people keep the faith, get good, educated, intelligent people with a lot of conviction and principles into the political mainstream, we will have an India that is truly worthy of being called a nation of the 21st century.
Sachin Pilot, let's give him a round of applause. Sachin Pilot says that India is much more than the youth, but the youth, 35 and under, is 51% of this country, Sachin. And if I were to look at your and Fayaz's arguments put together, I'm only placing it in context, I'm not getting into this debate, but if I take that argument of Fayaz and what you said, it's interesting, and I want this side to actually think about it and respond. Because if you Fayaz says that almost everything which has gone wrong is a representative of a social malaise. So what's wrong is the responsibility of society. Sachin argues that everything that's held this country together is because of its politics. So everything that's good is because of its politics. So everything wrong, society, everything, or largely a lot of things good, politics, it's a controversial point, but the more controversial point is the direct charge you made at Kiran Bedi, indirectly saying that she said nothing when she was working, when she was part of the system, and that her own social awakening has happened post-retirement. She's not going to let go of that, I hope not, later on this debate, but we are going to move on for the moment. And just a reminder to all our participants and audience, this is introductory comments. 4 have spoken, 4 more will speak after this, and after that, we have open debate. In the middle of the open debate, we'll have our youth participants asking questions as well. We go back to the open debate. Kiran Bedi, you want to rebut? I know.
Quick, just one statement.
One second. Now, there are some rules. If he concedes, if this side concedes, do they concede to a 15-second interjection from Kiran Bedi?
Yes, I can.
You concede, that's right.
My book called It's Always Possible documents, and it was written while in service. A book called It's Always Possible documents the entire corruption which was happening in Tihar jail. My book called I Dare documents the entire criminalization of police and the way policing was being failed is documented while in service. The government never came back to rebut it.
Right, okay. And that's when you were in service. Ashay Sahaya, next speaker from the Rashtriya Vidyalaya College of Engineering, is speaking against the motion. He can respond to Sachin, Fayaz, and speaking for the motion, and he can respond to all the speakers on this side.
Kudos to ma'am for writing that book, but I have a simple question for Mr. Sachin Pilot. Why should the cost of speaking up being to lose your source of livelihood, right? Today, young people who are joining the ranks of the bureaucracy look at the system and are scared to death looking at the way people like Khemka and Durga Shakti Nagpal are treated. And they basically have to face this choice that do I go into suspension and spend 30 days sitting at my home, or on the other hand, just subvert the system. The cost of speaking up should not be that high, and it's your fault that it is that high, right? But moving on to the second point, right? You spoke about how in the last decades we've had so many glorious moments. And I have a problem with this count your blessings approach that the political class has, right? Where the standard they apply to themselves is that this is what we have done as compared to the fact that we could have done nothing for you, when the standard should actually be this is what we've done compared to what we could have done for you, right? We never gauge ourselves to the lost opportunities. Yes, we've had lots of glory moments, but we've also had a larger share of embarrassments in terms of the way the political class has failed to deliver to the opportunities. Responding to Fawaz, you spoke about the fact that the youth is heterogeneous, and I agree with you. But the fact also is that the political class has failed the heterogeneous youth homogeneously, right? Because look at every sector of the youth, and they equally failed by the political class. You spoke about the Niamgiri tribals. I'm going to speak about them too, right? Look at this huge Maoist and Naxal movement across the country. It wasn't they didn't land from moon either. The reason they had to resort to weapons is because when an urban middle class youth doesn't find jobs in India, he takes the route of the H1B, and in the rural areas when a tribal is disenfranchised, he has to resort to the AK-47, and that's the way it has been played out to them, right? When the government, when the political class disenfranchises them in the pursuit of serving their own narrow interests, right? We've seen rampant collusion of the political class with the mining barons in these areas, and they've disenfranchised the youth because disenfranchising the rural youth works for them because the youth is idealistic and pegs them to a higher level of expectation. So you disenfranchise them, remove them, eliminate them from the system, and then you insulate yourself from any kind of backlash from these classes, right? And this forces them to take up guns, which is problematic. Furthermore, he comes out and asks us a question about the youth and the society is to blame as well. My counter question to you is this. where has the idealism gone from politics, right? Legislation was supposed to be a driving factor of societal change. Back in Jawaharlal Nehru's era, we had like the political establishment pass the anti-dowry law despite popular resistance. And from there, we have gone to a stage where in Rajiv Gandhi's era, we had the Shah Bano case where the parliament, to appease like certain sections of the society, went and reversed a positive Supreme Court judgment, something that we've seen all over again right now in the past few days with this ordinance, right, against the criminalization of politics, which was a, like, you know, almost like accidental that it was mitigated, but that shouldn't be the way the politics works. And with that, I'd like to rest my speech.
Well, thank you very much, Ashay Sahai. Let's move quickly. And speaking against the motion, our next speaker from the Shiromani Akali Dal, member of the opposition in Parliament in the Lok Sabha, Harsimrat Kaur Badal. The floor is yours to respond.
Thank you. You know, listening to this debate of get hold of the politicians and make them the whipping boys, they're the cause of all evils that's happening in the country. I mean, this seems to have become a favorite topic. And I think the root cause starts from, if you look at the quality of education we are giving our kids in school, when they're introduced to civics and to democracy, the first book that they pick up and they learn how the politicians are a bad lot, they lie to the people for a vote, and then yes, I have a daughter who's in class, who starts school in class 9, and I read their books. And I read the class 10 ones, and I read the 11 and the 12. These are the NCERT books, which are teaching the youth of today. I think all these kids should recall, if they recall their school books, as what a bad lot the politicians are. They do nothing good. They tell lies to the public, take the vote, forget about them. Then we have the media, which is just showcasing all the bad stuff the politicians are doing. We have the newspapers, where all you read is all the rot that is going on in the political system. And what are we doing to the democracy? Today, the result is that the entire nation of the 65% youth is disillusioned by the political system, disillusioned by politics, wants to have nothing to do with it, and blame them. Now, like rightly everybody says, that the political class is a mirror of society. Who chooses this political class and sends them there? Today, 2/3 of our country lives in the 6.5 lakh rural villages. 70% of those are below poverty line are also youth. Today, this political class has to address the aspirations which differ not just from state to state, but maybe 50 kilometers down from one district to another district. I ask you that in a family, let's be practical. In a family with one breadwinner, does he manage to meet the aspirations of the 7 members or the 5 members of his family? There's always kids complaining they're not getting, the wife complaining she's not getting, the husband not being able to make. Here's one political MP who's supposed to meet the aspirations of 9 districts, and here one political government that's supposed to meet the entire state. Yes, there's a lot of good that is happening, but who talks about it? Does anybody even ask me that what else I'm doing besides being an MP to help society, which is not my job? I come from a well-to-do family. I can live a life of leisure like everybody else. My colleague Sachin is what an educated, can have a white-collar job. We give up our air-conditioned comfort and go down to those villages to make a difference over there. Does anyone talk about that? It's absolutely easy to be the whipping boys and to generalize everybody is bad. All lawyers are bad, all doctors are bad, all teachers. Is that possible that all politicians are bad? But who talks about the one good thing that any politician is doing? Look where the country has, yes, we have failed on many counts, but do not generalize. Let me talk about my state. We talk about education. We were 14th when we took over 7 years ago. Today we are 3rd, only 2nd to Lakshadweep and Puducherry. We didn't just make it happen overnight. We worked, recruited 71,000 teachers, put up 9 universities, 18 colleges when there were only 3 before us. And today we are 3rd in the country. Why? Because we worked at it. We talk about today, what do youth want? They want good education. They want skills which can make them employable. They want jobs. 65% of the youth under 35, they need to feed their families. They need to be able to earn. If we talk about education, I've given you the statistics broadly. If I talk about skill, let's take a small thing. We decided that there were 10 million youths, people who needed security guards, every hotel, every hospital, even people at home. We set up under Punjab Policing a training center where every 3 months, thousands of youth from the rural areas are there given police training by the police for security guards. And millions of them are churned out, and today big companies like Group 4 and all come and book the whole batch. These are rural people who are even going to Dubai and to Saudi Arab just for security guards. There's mechanical training, motor training, so we provide. Yes, we may not have given jobs to everybody. Everybody aspires to get a government job. It's not possible. But the governments are making, and the governments who are making a difference are coming back into power and beating the incumbency, which may not be the routine. Like my state was from a revolving government. Always the other government came. But they came back. Why? Because we performed. So please do not generalize. And the onus lies on the youth to filter out the good and from the bad governments, to filter out the good from the bad politicians. If you just sit on voting day and say, oh, let's go see a movie, who's going to stand in that heat and vote, then don't complain of the lot that you're dumped with and the governments that you get. The onus is on you. You choose the people and send them. Don't leave it to that poor man who for a bottle of liquor or a few hundred rupee notes, and let's talk facts here. Yes, there are people who will not vote unless they're given money. Yes, there are a lot of people who will, because it's for them, it's a daily wage, which is much more than what they earn in a month. And there are lots of people who will not vote unless they get that bottle of liquor. So when the decision is left on that, and people, educated people like you, do not make the effort to go make that change, then please do not complain.
Harsimrat Kaur Badal. Who gives that bottle of liquor?
Who demands it, Yadav?
Who pays the money to vote?
Who demands it?
I
Who
won't
demands
enter into
it?
argument. I'm only who
No, let's
pushed the
be
ordinance
honest
through?
here. I don't want to give it, but what do I do if the fellow says, I want to vote for you, but I'll vote the other side?
These are only some
I'm not
issues.
saying I do it. Please get that clear before tomorrow someone says I'm doing
these
it.
are only
but
some
who's
issues.
demanding? I'm saying the onus is on the public. The
These are-
onus is on the youth. Let the youth get up and so we will not accept the money, we will not accept the booze. We're going to vote for the person who we think is right. Why does the public not do that?
So that's. These
I
are
would
some
do
of
it.
the issues which Fayaz and Harsimrat today seem to be making a point that the problem is with society. However compelling it is, or interesting or intriguing it is to get into the debate, I will avoid the temptation and leave that for another day. Our next speaker is Dr. Yogendra Yadav of the Aam Aadmi Party, who despite being a politician believes that the motion is correct. Dr. Yadav.
Let me begin by saying that my friends on the other side have actually made some very fair and reasonable points. And it's only fair to take that on right now. And I must salute both my politician friends here. From the political establishment in the narrow and proper sense of the term, I'm an outsider. They say, and it's absolutely right to say, that politicians make for very easy targets. It is very easy to blame someone who happens to be sitting at the top for everything that's wrong with the system. Therefore, we have to be nuanced, we have to be specific, we need to understand. At the same time, I would say, it is also very easy for a doctor or an engineer or a politician to make it a question of professional grievance. What do I do? I'm working so hard. We are not talking here about the problems, the individual personal disorders of a bunch of people. That's not the point. We are speaking about a systemic disorder here. And the systemic disorder resides in the manner in which our democracy is practiced, in the manner in which it throws up a class, systematically, a class which suffers from, allow me to say, multiple organ disorder, multiple organ failure of a kind, systematically. The problem is not with individuals necessarily. It is right to say that our democracy has great achievements. Of course it does. The question is it because of the political class or despite the political class? Is it because of what the erstwhile political class during our freedom struggle did? Or is it because of the present political class and what it does? It is correct to say that politicians come from the society. And yes, the society has to take a blame. It's like literature, which mirrors society. The trouble is, which part of the society do they mirror? Like literature, do you represent and mirror the scum of the earth? Or do you represent or mirror the finest that exists in society? Is it that people get to choose whichever political class they want? Or is it that the lanes that lead to the selection of political class have been captured by some organizations, allow me to say by some families? Yes, those coming from families do get elected. Yes, they have to work hard to get elected. I don't want to make a cheap point here. But the point is that the entry barriers are simply so high for those who do not come from dynasties. Yes, the people choose, but do they choose under free conditions? Do they get a complete open menu to choose from? Those are the questions we need to ask. My friend Fayaz spoke beautifully. Fayaz, you could have been speaking for me. The only question I want to ask you is that Chotu in the Dhaba, the Adivasi in Niyamgiri, Sharmila Irom, has the political class done justice to them? For me, if there is an ultimate indictment of this political class, and let me clarify what do I mean by this political class. My friend talked about existing political class. This is the political establishment of the country, and if you want to operationalize it, these are political parties which have been either ruling at the state or the center in the last 2 decades. That gets you about 40 political parties who have captured political power in this country. And if there's one indictment of this political class, Fayaz, it's your words. Sharmila Irom is the ultimate indictment of this political class, that Muslim youth who wants to live a dignified life in his own country where his forefathers were born, and every moment he has to think twice before getting a house, before taking a small place in Delhi, who always worries before he goes to a police station which is meant to protect him. That, to me, is an ultimate indictment of political class. The problem is not, and that's the final point I wish to make, let's not get into a simplified assessment of politicians don't having character. I mean, let's talk more serious things. The problem is not loss of character or ethics alone. That, of course, is the case. The real problem is also that the political class, the existing political class of today, has lost political judgment, it has lost political skills, and it has lost political nerves. Thank you.
Yogendra Yadav. A moot point. I'll open up. It's just one more speaker, Ms. Badal, and after that we'll open up to open debate, and that's going to be very, very interesting, and I'm sure fiery, hopefully as well. Point being made here for the opposition to note is that Yogendra's point is that the entry barriers are so difficult that the youth of this country can't afford to participate in politics, and he argues that only dynasties control.
That's incorrect.
But you say it's incorrect, you can defend that, but after our last speaker, who's Vipul Nanda from Bangalore's National Law School of India. Vipul, our last speaker against the motion. You can wrap this up before we go into open debate. Vipul.
Thank you, Arnab. I think when you speak of political judgment and skill, the question to ask ourselves is, our representatives, are they supposed to be exercising their own judgment, their individual opinions, their consciences, or are they supposed to be representing us and our constituencies and our opinions and our ideals? The problem here is when you assume that our political class must exercise their judgment from some sort of elite educated perspective upon individuals who don't have that opinion, who have not voted for them for that reason, who have not voted on them on the basis of any sort of ideology, but have voted for them because they believe that this person is the one who will fight their fight for them. When we look at the rise of regional politics, when we look at the rise of identity politics, it comes not from individuals trusting the judgment of their representatives, but recognizing that having representation is the first step to political awakening. We're at that stage of transition where we recognize that these communities are finally speaking out and having a political voice. But we can't keep saying that the representatives are failing them if the information, the election, and the kind of politics that gets played into putting those representatives there continues to be what the electorate wants. We can't question. It's not like these families have decided somehow or skewed the process or they're fixing the election. That's not probably true, at least at that basic bedrock we have to assume that's not. And if we assume that, people want them to be there. If there are certain families who've captured certain lanes, it's because they could, because people allowed them to do so, and any sort of opposition that has ever come up has not gotten enough democratic traction, right? Which brings us back to the fundamental questions of this debate. Now, when we look at the idea that there are only 943 women for every 1,000 men in this country, that's bad enough. But when we look at that in the age group between 0 to 6, that's 913, which means in the last 10 years, in spite of social activism which our political class has done, in spite of all sorts of measures that they've done in terms of social welfare, in terms of giving incentives, in terms of criminalizing sex determination before the birth of the child, and worse still, in urban areas, in the most affluent districts, that number is 905 for every 1,000 men. Now that effectively means, Amartya Sen says 100 million women have just disappeared. What about their aspirations? You can't blame this on the political class. It's so easy to say that that leader made this happen. That's just not true. Because these leaders have done everything that you can reasonably conceive that they can. They have tried to install some sort of regulatory mechanism on being able to determine the gender of the child. They have tried to do whatever they can to educate in this sort of scenario. They've done what they can to uplift women as much as they can. Or maybe they failed in some ways at all. But you can't blame societal ills and societal perceptions upon individuals who are supposed to represent that perspective in society and labor under that perspective. These people aren't some sort of leaders as we understand them to be. They are our representatives and they are supposed to be our voice. And if our voice happens to be telling them to do these things which from our upper class, our upper middle class perspective we think to be evil or pernicious or uneducated or illiterate, isn't that our fault more than it's theirs? If we don't go out and we don't try to educate people, if we don't go out and talk about the issues that are important, if we sit here and talk and recognize that most people in this country will not be watching this broadcast because they either don't have access to television, don't have access to cable, and certainly don't have Airtel, Dish TV on any of those, that clearly means at some basic level, information isn't reaching these people. And the reason for that is either we are apathetic, we don't care, and the people who have the knowledge and who have the information are happier sitting on it, going and watching Rang De Basanti, turning up for a few morchas. In spite of this new political activism we've had in the youth, the voter turnouts are still ridiculously low for the upper class urban youth. Where are we going with this? We can't keep blaming people, and we keep talking about how politicians pass the buck. Look at us. We continuously say this party is bad, we bring in a new party, that party is bad, we keep finding things that are flawed to them because we aren't getting what we want, we aren't getting our jobs. But when governments bring in things like the NREGA, instead of arguing about how it's being dispersed, they said, what are those people doing? Why do they need employment guarantee? Why do they need food security? Because they're starving. Why do they need a right to information? Because they need to know. How can we operationalize the right to education? Some people will not get it. Well, it's important for everyone to have education and we ought to make the effort. Let's stop trying to say that we need to sit in our homes and get everything delivered to our doorstep, and let's take responsibility for our actions, especially in the political arena, because the political class is everyone, because we're in a democracy and everyone gets to vote. Thank you.
Vipul, thank you very much. Vipul says caste and identity politics is because of society, not created by politicians. He says this despite Mandal and VP Singh. He says this despite Babri Masjid and LK Advani. Now, is caste and identity politics happening because of society or due to the politicians who encourage it? This is another controversial issue which will come up for debate. Shankar, your thoughts on the basic points we've raised so far. And after this, we are going into a 10-15 minute open debate route. Shankar.
To my mind, the people arguing against the motion have made two fairly important points. One is that the political class doesn't exist in a vacuum. It merely represents or is thrown up by the rest of society. Right. And therefore, to draw this distinction between the two as if they're two separate entities doesn't make much sense. To which Yogendra responded by saying that the lanes are closed. Yogendra, if I might, you're the surest illustration of how the lanes aren't closed. You are today part of a party which has been in existence for less than a year, if I'm not mistaken, and you are out there campaigning, saying, we are leading the race in Delhi today.
You agree
so the lanes are not as closed as you think they are, and as the youth tends to think they are. So that's one important point that the people arguing against the motion have made. The other is, what is the yardstick by which you measure what the political class has delivered? You can have an absolute yardstick which says all aspirations have to be met, and that clearly will never happen. Or you can have a relative yardstick. One sort of relative yardstick is the sort that Mr. Pilot suggested, which is compare yourself with what's happening in your neighborhood or in the rest of the world. Another sort of yardstick is the sort that Ms. Badal was talking about. You look at where we were so many years ago and look at where we are today. So those, I think, are two powerful arguments made by the people arguing against the motion. The arguments made by those for the motion are, well, as you said, powerful even before this debate began. So I think those are the points that this side really needs to respond to. You, of course, need to respond to the charge that, some fairly obvious things that they said, which is, why are we 67 years after independence where we are? And it's one thing to say we couldn't have achieved everything. It's another to try and explain away how, in some cases, we have slid from where we were. We aren't even moving in the right direction. Criminalization in politics today is far greater than it ever was. I'm sure you'll admit that. So it's not even a movement in the right direction. That is something that the political class does need to account for. Corruption, again, the perception, and if it's not a reality, you'll need to convince us on that, is that things are worsening, not improving. So that's not a matter of absolute versus relative yardsticks. Yep. It's a question of moving in the wrong direction altogether.
Opening this up, keep in mind our country is at an inflection point. We are talking about the youth. They're changing youth. They're snatching their rights back from the ruling classes if they are not happy. They are more assertive, they are more demanding, and they are less tolerant of this resigned indifference to corruption and all the problems in the system. Opening it up right now for interjections, what we'll do is 30-second interjection, 1 minute reply. 30-second interjection, 1 minute reply from both sides. We'll go from this side to the other. We'll keep it fast, we'll keep it moving, and we'll allow the first interjection from those speaking against the motion. I've been seeing that hand go up for a long time, so I hand it over to Fawaz Shaheen. Be specific, Fawaz. Who is your interjection to?
Address Dr. Kiran Bedi. You said Jan Jangal Jameen is being led by the politicians, but it's not just the politicians, it's also huge multinational corporations, an assorted number of NGOs and middlemen cutting corners. And what do we do with them? I mean, 2G scam, we all demonize 2 Raja, and that's how it should be. How many of us boycotted Tata Docomo because it benefited from the 2G scam? Where do we place the responsibility of the others involved in corruption? Where do we place the responsibility? Why do we respect all these middlemen? Why do we idealize money so much? Just because somebody has made money, we know they've made money out of cutting corners, and yet we don't hold them accountable. We don't organize social boycotts. Why don't we boycott a doctor, a government doctor who's doing private practice? Why do we give them the incentive to be corrupt? And it's all of us. So you can't just keep blaming the politicians. They're just the most
Kiran
visible
Bedi is
symbol.
responding. No, Kiran Bedi, you can interject after that.
Friends, multinationals cannot walk in themselves. Multinationals and no company.
No, watch it. Let her reply.
No company can walk into these jungle zameen areas by themselves. They have to be cleared bureaucratically. Look what's happened in Colgate. Who allotted Colgate blocks to private companies which had nothing to do with power, cement, etc.? Who did it? It's the politicians. Politicians bled us in thousands and thousands of crores in Colgate, in 2G, in CWG. All these companies came through government and bureaucrats. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's been a political bureaucratic nexus. And also the corporates. But no, corporates have paid for it. They paid, but who asked for it? They paid the price and absolutely distorted the level playing field for other deserving. So your Colgate, your 2G, your CWG are all initiated by the givers. Who is the giver? The politician, the minister, and the bureaucrat.
Wait, let her complete. Then we take a first interjection from the other side.
Therefore, all I'm saying is no multinational, no company can just walk in by itself. It's not a walk-in. It's allowing a walk-in. It's making a passage for walk-in at a price. And that's what I said. The politicians have bled the exchequer of its national wealth. And national wealth which belongs to all of us.
First interjection from the Treasury benches. Who's it coming from? Okay, it's coming from Ashwin. Go ahead.
Can I just rebut to what Dr. Bedi said?
Do you concede that? Because then she's going in for a counter interjection. Go ahead.
Who comes in with the suitcase of money offering it to the politician? Why should that hand come to the politician?
Why do they accept?
Why?
Well, let her complete one at a time. No, one second. May I request one thing that from one side, let one participant speak from this side, and once that is over, complete.
Would you, as an individual, pay to get your child good admission or something? That's a decision you make on your own moral values.
When I'm not getting it in the first place, I will go ahead.
So that means
that
means the company that's going in with the money back is excused.
No, the fact that these are essentials and not delivered immediately to at the time of my need, I will definitely look at out of the ways to go ahead and gain the same,
That's
right?
what is wrong.
Now, secondly,
That's where the problem starts because you don't want to follow the path.
No, I understand. I will look at the problem from your side, ma'am. Now, when you spoke about liquor bottles, the want from the other side, that's why the provision from this side, right? Now, don't you realize that we elect a government that has the ability, we assume that they have enough ability to discern between what is right and what is wrong, better than what we have, right? So when I ask for a liquor bottle, will you keep providing me the liquor bottle until I keep asking for it? is my question. That's it.
If
Counter. 1 second. Would you like to respond to that, or we move to an interjection from their side? You have an interjection. Who is it to?
To that bench in general. So you spoke about how the society, and to Vipul Nanda specifically, when you spoke about how society is the political class is a reflection of society, right? If that were true, then today a lot of practices like dowry and casteism would still be legal. No, we as a society recognize our flaws, and that's why we institute the government to insulate us from our own flaws, right? It's not a utopian society. We have problems, and we create a political class to have some vision and lead the people. But what do we have instead? When the Kha Panchayats go ahead and kill the youth in Haryana, not one political party comes out and opposes this Kha Panchayat. When the political class is colluding with the Kha Panchayats who are murdering the youth, what hope does the youth have? And they're saying, you don't come out and say anything. If I come out and say anything in Sonipat in Haryana, my head will be lopped off, and I don't want to go through that. Maybe that's the reason why I'm not speaking up.
In the context of Kha Panchayats, is Sachin Pilot provoked enough to respond? Let me say this, Sachin, that in a letter to the Kha Panchayats at that point of time, a member of parliament from your party, Mr. Jindal, acknowledged their existence since the time of great rulers like Ashoka and Harshavardhan, and said that they have always given a new direction to society. That was the reference. So are Kha Panchayats a reflection of the society is the question the youth are asking you?
Well, I'm not here speaking on behalf of any other member of parliament. I'm speaking for myself in this debate. One, whether it's one panchayat, Kha Panchayat, whatever panchayat it is, there is one law in this country and nobody is above that. A panchayat may issue diktat, people may or may not follow it, but the rule of law, the government and the eyes of the law are same for anyone. I, for one, do not stand with any diktat of anybody who believes that he or she, collectively or individually, is above the law. Panchayat or no panchayat. I come from a rural area and I understand the dynamics of caste politics. Still, it takes a strong person to get up and say no in the face of opposition. And I've done it, and I'm telling you, you may bear the political negativity of it, but you must have the courage of conviction to say so. And I say for myself. Second point you made, my young friend believes that the government over the last 5-6 decades has done nothing. One thing we used to have in the 80s was a lot of horse trading. It was the political class which imposed this rule of having a 2/3 majority to break a political party. We imposed some political reform. I don't think it's sufficient, but it's a beginning in the right direction. We have an election commission. 25 years ago, the elections were run amok. No one knew what was going on. Today, there is such stringent oversight by the election commission. Who appoints the election commission? Who appoints the judicial process in our country? It is the political class which gives it oversight to all these agencies. They may not work perfectly, but they do give a counterweight on how things can be stopped when they go wrong. So 5,000 people were mandated to run this country in 52. Today, there are 3 million directly elected people, from the panchayats to Zilla Parishads to the mayor to the corporations to the MLAs and MPs. So there has been decentralization of power. How has that happened? Because the politicians didn't want to keep the power. At some level, we thought we must decentralize the power of making decisions.
Mr.
And
Pilot,
that all has happened.
are you in favor of reservations on economic criteria rather than that of caste? Because if you say so, are you? Because I found a previous comment of yours which reflected a certain amount of uncertainty, I thought, because when you were asked this question about whether you support reservations on economic criteria instead of caste, you said in April 2001, and I quote you, Mr. Sachin Pilot, you said, even if you wanted to give benefits to the poor in India, what criteria can you use? You can't use land as criteria because the land ceiling laws, no one has that much land. Without reliable criteria, how do you go about identifying the poor? I feel if someone of a family has in the past availed the opportunity, they shouldn't get it again. I'm just thinking aloud, but there's no system to record that either. In other words, you are not speaking assertively, Mr. Pilot, against caste-based reservations. Are you willing to make the big change?
I am so flattered. You've done some detailed research on what I said 10 years ago, and I still stand by it. Let me tell you, in this country, we still work with the ovarian lottery. Where you are born, who's your mother will dictate which caste you're in, what your social status will be, who you'll marry, and what your jobs will be. I'm of the opinion, anybody born in any religion, any caste or any part of our country deserves the helping hand of the government. And there should be an economic-based criteria to determine let me finish, who the person the help must go to. I am one of those people who believe that I belong to the backward community, for example. Me and my children do not need reservation. Anybody who has availed the opportunity of getting the benefits of a reservation must not do it for their children or their grandchildren. We must rise above it, but today, as you know, in India, farm income is not taxed. There is no way to determine how rich or poor a farmer is. If we are able to devise a criteria on economic reservation, I'm all for it.
See, Mr. Pilot, the question, no, one second, I just want to, the question asked, because it stemmed from the question asked here, which is a very basic question. This country's youth require big radical change, and they need a group of politicians who no longer tell us that khap panchayats are tradition or caste based criteria for giving away benefits is necessary. We need a radical change beyond that, and that hopefully, like the withdrawal of this ordinance and bill, should not have to be forced upon the political class. We have a rebut from this side. One second. Who's your question to? Mr. Pilot. Okay,
right,
go ahead.
Your idea of reservation, I do not negate the fact that reservation is a tool to represent, right? But have you realized how reservation as a tool has been demeaned by the political class? I'm assuming, I know reservation is a good tool, right? But what the political class has done is create controversy out of this tool. This sacred tool of reservation giving representation to people in the lower class has been messed about, has been tampered with, and we have a lot of controversy on that. Don't you see that this tool has not been used in the effect that it was desired to be used in?
You know, reservation, by the way, is not a poverty alleviation program. Reservation is, for thousands of years, people who have been subjugated to social evils are giving a platform to go and speak and represent themselves. If there was no representation, if there was no reservation in parliament and assemblies, how many Dalits would get elected? How many Dalits today are in business, are TV anchors, are journalists, are running business houses? Because the society is shaped that way. We all need to get education to make sure everybody has the same level playing field. And the one way to do that social inclusiveness is to have reservation. And until we amend a constitution and have reservation based on economic criteria, we will go by what's there. The Article 343 of the Constitution states that reservation will be given on the basis of years of backwardness of society and education. Economic criteria is still not been figured out, but I'm personally of the opinion that if you have economic criteria, there'll be more even-handedness, and everybody, upper caste or lower caste, if you're poor, you deserve the help of the government. That's my personal opinion. We'll have to get consensus to change the whole constitution to get that going. 47, when the country got independence, we needed that positive attitude in our thinking so that people who were on the fringes could be made part of the mainstream.
So your defense to reservation is people being poor. Now, what is your defense to people being poor in the first place?
One minute. May I please? May I please just direct it through the chair? It will be much more useful. Now we are getting some interjections from this side. Consider this, that Mr. Pilot argues that, he is not for caste and not for religion, but these are certain necessities. But the same argument that, we do not like the influence of religion in politics, which came up because of the Babri Masjid agitation, could be argued that there was a generation which got introduced to caste by politicians in 1990. This generation, which is in this audience today, would never have thought of caste had it not been for VP Singh and the Mandal Commission movement in 1990. It changed the body politics of our country. Interjection coming in. I think Harsimrat wanted to add a point there. Harsimrat makes the next point. We'll keep it going. Harsimrat.
We both want to answer to the liquor bottle thing to start off with. First, when I asked him that take the shortcut for admission, would you pay money? He said, if I'm not getting what I want, I'll take that. So when I'm not getting what I want and give the liquor bottle, I'm wrong, but he's right. Number one. No, one more. Arnab, I haven't finished. I want to also...
No overspeaking.
Can I answer to what Yogendra, a few points that he made about...
You can, but I request you, take it through the chair, then I'll decide who responds from this side. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, complete your point.
About the narrow entry into, for political, dynastic politics, I fought against 13 other contestants. It could have been 30. They were from diverse backgrounds, diverse political parties. If my constituents chose to choose me by the highest margin because of the work done by my party. So don't say the entry is narrow. It's people who want to get into that field.
Yogendra Yadav responds to the entry barrier point.
You made 2 points. I want to put the other point also about the Muslim youth wanting to live a life of dignity. You've all heard about the atrocities on the Sikhs overseas just because on the basis of our attire. So we are being targeted in so-called modern open countries. Now, what are you talking about, India? This is the same story everywhere.
Yogendra Yadav, on entry barriers, we have a Badal and a Pilot here. If you're saying specifically that they are here because they are a Badal and a Pilot, let's say so and let them respond. You stand by your point?
Very carefully. I did not say that anyone from any dynasty can walk into any parliament anytime. I said there are huge entry barriers for those who come from outside the establishment, and there are huge initial advantages for those who come from within the dynasties. Initial advantage is not a guarantee of victory, but absence of initial advantage is almost a guarantee of defeat. If someone, I really want in Bhatinda, an ordinary, articulate, young Punjabi woman who does not come from any of these establishment parties, who is the daughter of a Siri, who works in a village, to be able to stand against you and have the same initial advantage in politics and let talent decide. This country is being deprived of political talent because of these dynasties and money bags who capture a huge initial advantage, which is almost impossible to circumvent. My problem with much of what my opponents are saying here is that they seem to be misreading the very motion itself. The motion, to my mind, nowhere says political class is the only class or the only people which have failed the country or to meet the expectations of the youth. Yes, there are all kinds of problems, and it would be utterly silly to say the whole country has gone wrong because of one set of characters. The only question being asked is, this one class, political class of today, not of yesteryears, not of 60 years ago, has this class failed the aspirations of the youth of today? So let's stick to the topic.
I think, Yogendra, just an answer to that. My father-in-law stood as a sarpanch. After a sarpanch, he became a block samiti member, Zilla Parishad member, became an MLA, became an MP, became a member of the central government, then became a chief minister 5 times over. He had no political backing.
Kiran Bedi, Kiran Bedi.
Respond to Mrs. Badal's viewpoint, who brings the briefcases? I think that's hit me very hard. She says, why do they bring briefcases? Why does the security allow those briefcases?
No, not the security, the people.
No. Why do the security allow those briefcases? Number one. Number two, let's know each politician, exceptions, barring good exceptions, has a price, and it's known in the market. The price is known in the market. And therefore, there's a question of demand and supply. There's an expectation, there's a perception, and the briefcase comes. Listen, we've had bureaucrats, Arnab, we've had bureaucrats whose reputations precede that no briefcase is going to be allowed. And there are bureaucrats and politicians is that's the focus. It precedes, abhi aayega, iski itni कीमत hai. Pehle advance, uske baad ye. So I think that's the point.
Sachin Pilot, does every politician have a price?
I said barring exceptions.
Does every politician
He may be an exception.
I think if you remove the word may, I'll be happier. I don't think it's correct to blame every single person wearing a kurta pajama thinking that he or she is out there to loot the country. And what we're doing, unfortunately, in talking in so general a term, is creating such a negative cloud on the young boys and girls who watch television, is that we're doing a disservice to our country. Find the people who are guilty and prosecute them. Mr. Yadav, let me finish. Everyone who is involved in any corruption is charge-sheeted, convicted, put behind jail. You can cascade them, you can criticize them. But please, for the sake of God, do not try and generalize every single person who wants to be a politician, because what you're doing is you're dissuading a next generation of Indians to be involved in our democracy. You're making them feel that this is the cesspool of all evil. Keep away from it. You have done the right thing. You have joined a political party. You fight and you lose. That's okay. But do not create an impression that this is the demons of the world have gotten together and are running a country. Because what will happen then is people will lose faith in our system. And once that happens, you will see what happened in the Middle East, in other parts of our country. You're causing for a much larger problem to take place. Let's fix what is wrong. Let's put blame on people who deserve to be blamed. But do not generalize. That's not a good thing for our democracy.
People wouldn't generalize, but in December 2009, there was a Goa member of parliament who said that in the context of crimes against women, he said that a lady who moves around with strangers for days altogether, even beyond the middle of the night, is to be treated on different footing. This is what a Goa member of parliament, and the person was from the Congress party. Do you sack that MP?
Or no, if I pick up every comment, I am not responsible.
Did you throw him out of politics?
Everyone who makes a negative comment, whether a journalist or a businessman or a politician, they are answerable for their own stand that they take. I am saying don't generalize every politician, and that's a short point I've made.
Yogendra Yadav wanted to respond. Shankar wants to make.
Since you're a member of the Council of Ministers, the generalization also comes, you said, let's convict those who are guilty. Let's not get after everybody. What did you decide to do which prevented us from convicting those who were guilty? The Union Council, the Cabinet decided to pass an ordinance which would have allowed convicted legislators to continue. And it was public pressure which forced you to back off on that. So the generalization doesn't come out of nothing. The perception that sab chor hai, while I completely agree that it's an incorrect perception, is rooted in some reality. There is some basis to that perception.
Did you not realize the impact of what you were about to do?
And there is also a sense of faith in our democracy. When opinions are heard, people do change their stand, governments do reconsider, political parties do reconsider the stands they've taken earlier. And I tell you, one second.
Unanimously.
Unanimously, and second of all, when a government takes a decision or a head of institution takes a decision, it is not fixed for all times to come. If there are shortcomings, if we feel that something has gone wrong, let's stand up and say, well, we need to correct it. And in good time, things have been corrected. And that's the power of democracy. That is the power of public pressure. That's the power of a political party being dynamic
But why
to the needs
does,
and aspirations of the people.
If a broader question comes to my mind, Shankar, that if the political class is in sync with the youth or the people of this country and in sync with their aspirations, why do we have to beg, cajole, push, request them to make those changes? I mean, even the Anna agitation and the Lokpal, they had to, agitation was on since April. They had to be pushed and cajoled, and then the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi said, I take my time to make up my mind. Why was it not apparent to Rahul Gandhi right from the start? Up to some members of the audience, please. And I have the names here. Ajay Gopal is from BMSC Bangalore. He has a question. He's for the motion, I think. Yes, Ajay.
I'll go ahead and say that the political class have not only failed to meet the aspirations of the youth of India, but they've gone a step ahead in assuming that we are ignorant, naive, and will remain silent irrespective of what they do. They've become a class unto themselves, and they believe, and there's a sense of arrogance in them. Some time ago, and during the course of the debate, Vipul said that the political class is the voice of the people. And what is the voice saying? That the women are dented and painted. Just because we achieved freedom at the stroke of the midnight hour doesn't mean that women can walk about after dark. There's a political class who expects us to have a full and filling meal at ₹10. And the gentleman who said ₹5 is going to have free meals very soon at the cost of the state exchequer. My contention lies at the very fact that why was such a bill was raised in the first place? Yeah. Where was your sense of morality when you thought that we could allow criminals enter the parliaments and sit there?
Answer, Sachin. I think you're the best person to take that.
I'm not here to defend people who are convicted by any court, lower court or high court. The sense was that the political consensus, by the way, I'm not pointing fault at the BJP, but the political consensus in the discussion that we had recorded was that all political parties told the government that let's do this, let's pass a bill in parliament. Didn't go through. Hang on, let me finish. The Congress party reconsidered its stand, made the government change its position, and today that bill has been withdrawn, the ordinance has been withdrawn. I can understand your point that why wasn't it done at the right time. My point is that it's been done. The time, of course, could have been different, but the fact that it's been done, it's because there was a pressure, there was within the party thinking about why we must do the right thing, respect what the BJP says, what other people have said.
Sachin, on a lighter note, I am touched by the faith that you have in the Bharatiya Janata Party. And the manner in which you allowed yourself to be guided.
Touched at all. I didn't know you had the sensitivity to be touched at all. I'm very flattered that you are.
I am so tempted to jump into the debate. Ajay, can I just, before I come back to Shankar, briefly?
I suspect there's something wrong with the acoustics here. He keeps saying dynamic and I keep hearing dynastic.
Our second question is coming in. It's from Nivya Shetty.
No, it's absolutely relevant to Sachin's, if I could make a statement. I have a news clipping of Economic Times of 26th January 2010. And this is Mrs. Sonia Gandhi's. I have a news clip, so it's absolutely relevant.
Yeah.
She said this on 26 January 2010, Economic Times, and it says, must clean politics of criminals, Sonia. Do you know what? This is what she said. If she said this in 2010, and she said exactly what the ordinance has belied, why did she say this? This is the problem. You say something else in 2010, that the parties must get rid of criminals.
Okay.
And here, you exactly do the opposite. My point is, how do we believe anything which politicians say today? Anything. Here is it 3 years said, and it is undone. Undone by the ordinance.
Well, two youth participants want to respond on behalf of the government, I presume. Vipul Nanda has been waiting for some time. Vipul, you want to speak?
Ma'am, I must begin by saying that the question here is those representatives, they've been elected in spite of being criminals, they've been elected by people who, in spite of them being criminals, feel that this is the best representative for them. We can impose our judgment as much as we like on any individual in the world and pass a value judgment to all choices that we make. But we don't know what's going on in their mind, and we can't question it The basic premise of democracy is everyone's allowed to make their own choice. Unless you are suggesting that Sonia Gandhi imposes her personal will on every decision the Congress party makes from now until the point that she retires, I think that would be more of a complete betrayal of democracy than having a system that allows people to elect who they want, where they want, and when they want.
Well, okay, count.
You're claiming right now that these politicians are elected because of the will of the people, right? And you told us it's the people that came out and gave the suitcases to the politicians. My question is simple. When a member of Raj Sabha, Mr. Rashid, recently was convicted for selling seats in medical colleges, what hope do the people have? I don't think that the society came together and said that we want to reflect ourselves in the polity by creating a government which requires us to pay for the medical seats which we will never be able to afford, right? So this expectation from the political class isn't a reflection of the society, because the society doesn't want to pay for medical seats that it can get based on merit.
One point at a time, pause.
See, are there any DU students here? Can you raise your hands? Any DU students? Okay, is it not true that votes in your student union elections are cast on liquor bottles, the rain dance party tickets, and the latest movie releases, right? When we ourselves are every party does this, by the way. You know, I'm not here to play any blame game. I'm just here to say a word of caution. When we ourselves are making our student unions irrelevant, our agency irrelevant, it's surprising that in all this debate, nobody has raised anything to do with, any point to do with student unions, because we've left them in the lurch. We've forgotten about them, and we hate to talk anything related to them. Our parents discourage us from going into politics. We think it's something dirty to do that. We think it's unfashionable to go out, to ask for votes, to campaign, and then we start blaming all the politicians for everything that's wrong. Where is our sense of accountability?
No, we have a solid point. From banning books, movies, textbooks, school curriculum, I think political units of political parties at the student level have led from the front. I mean, we know what Aditya Thackeray did when he campaigned against Rohinton Mistri's book. And he pushed himself on the Mumbai University Vice-Chancellor. You want a counter, but I'd actually want to comment from the audience, if you don't mind. And our next audience question is coming in from Nivya Shetty of Sophia High School in Bangalore. Is she here, please? Nivya? Yeah, go ahead. Take the mic. And if you have a specific question to a specific person, that'll be great.
My question is directed at you. So at the outset, I would like to say that I feel the Aam Aadmi Party is as ideologically different as can be from any political party in this country. Because me, that is a non-politically affiliated youth, feel that we have a real chance of getting into public life through forums provided by parties like y'all. But having said that, I have a few issues regarding some views y'all have expounded lately. One of them being that your central model of governance completely involves what the consumers have to dictate. But say on issues like the pricing of critical commodities like petrol or gas and water, I think I speak for everyone when I say that if we have a say in the pricing of these commodities, we'd like them to give it to us for free. So that is one point down. And the other one you'll also talk about is the oil exploration, which the government, y'all feel, has awarded to the foreign companies and not so much to the country as such. So this is to say that people who have actual expertise in the area are to be kept aside because we feel we're giving away money to the outside companies rather than give it to the government. Also, you all talk about the electricity rates having to be reduced through private agencies. This is to say that basically the highly erratic supply of power through the central government or through the state government can be priced as high as possible, but that to be provided by the private agencies should be reduced. So in summary, your economic policy is anti-privatization, feels that the government must take forward its stance on every issue, irrespective of people who have an area of expertise. So do you feel that if the Aam Aadmi Party comes to power today, there is going to be the multiple organ failure that you stated exists in the party and will also be reflected by your party?
Very happy that you asked these questions. And the premise of that question lies in the fact that here is something that promises to be different. And that really, I mean, we're not into Congress versus BJP versus Aam Aadmi or whatever party. The whole point of the country right now is that all of us feel suffocated by the political establishment. And anything which appears to be somewhat different catches our attention, makes us ask questions. And we must ask questions. But the very fact that you rose and asked the question about a tiny political party, to my mind, makes the case of how much the suffocation with the existing political class must be. On your specific questions, we are developing our economic policy. We have nowhere said experts are not to be consulted. All we said was private monopolies of national resources are not to be accepted. All we said was that the government must live by its own contract, and no private player should be able to dictate prices to the government, to dictate cabinet reshuffles, to get ministers who have the courage to oppose them removed. That's all we said. We did not demand free electricity. All we did was that we produced evidence for collusion between government, regulators, and private players in electricity. All we demanded was that the CAG should audit it. And whatever the CAG decides, even if it's higher than the existing prices, we are willing to live by it.
I think it was a very focused question on the Aam Aadmi Party. I don't want to veer away from the subject at hand, which is really whether the political class has been in touch with the aspirations of the people. Sachin is tempted to respond to you, but I'll come back actually. I want to steer this debate back to where we started after Sachin's response.
Mr. Yadav, I have an assessment, and tell me if you agree with the assessment or not. I feel there is a similarity between your leader, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, and Mr. Narendra Modi. And I'll say why. Mr. Anna Hazare became who he is and prominent because he was seen by the side of Mr. Anna Hazare. And Anna Hazare was the face of everything that you were doing. Today, Anna Hazare has been kicked out and Mr. Kejriwal is in the front face. Mr. Modi did the same thing with Mr. Advani. Mr. Advani made Mr. Modi who he is, he kicked him out and today has taken center stage. So somewhere there is an attempt to get political importance by kicking out people who have been your mentors. Is that principled in nature? Do you believe that's okay for someone to be treated so badly?
Sachin, one second. You see, this is a very interesting tactic that politicians usually adopt.
It's a simple question.
I'm happy to respond.
No, one second. I am practiced. I know you are happy to respond. I know he's happy to respond back, and then she'll respond, and I know where this is go. You see, as a practiced performer in this whole business of political debate, let me say this. Don't move away from the subject. This country wants change, and let's go to big change. What is big change? Don't give tickets to criminals. Have the right to reject. And for God's sake, if you preach so much, bring your parties under the Right to Information Act. That's big change. Take this vote in the House today. Let's debate that. And immediately, I'm absolutely sure that political parties do that across the board, then the youth of this country will say that we are totally in sync with the political class. So that's the debate subject.
Criminals.
I have brought the debate back successfully on track, and Harsimrat Kaur Badal will now agree to implement all these three in her own party.
No, I will do that after you start off by saying that first the public to promise that they will not vote for criminals and let the educated youth go down and educate that villager counterpart
till
of
that
his
happens,
not to do
till
that.
that happens, you will continue to give liquor bottles and put up criminals in
simultaneously. It needs to be done simultaneously. It cannot, one hand not and the other not functioning.
Are you saying that we will continue to give tickets to criminals? We will not give people the right to reject, and we will not bring political parties under the RTI. We will distribute liquor bottles and cash and then blame society.
And allow briefcases.
All those things need to be gotten rid of. But if you think just one class of people, because they're the political people, can set it all right, you're mistaken. Society needs to work as hard to set it right. And together we need to set it right.
I see a lot of hands go up. So I'll first take it from here, and then I'm going to take a few questions from the audience as well. Yes. Go ahead, quickly, briefly.
Right. Let's assume all of us want liquor here. Right? And let's assume you don't want to, you understand that liquor is bad as such, and you don't want, at least it shouldn't be used to gain votes, right? Now let's assume you say, I'm not going to provide liquor. Are we going to continue asking for it 10 years straight? Aren't we going to think that now liquor is not going to be provided? Let's realize what the rationale is behind the government.
No.
You cannot change their thinking, understandable. You can change yours by denying them the right of something that is wrong.
You are going to ask for it because if I don't give it, someone else is going to give it to you.
Exactly. So what you do instead is, I understand. So what you do on the other hand is give them more liquor.
So that the opposite side. That's when people like us will not want to give it to you.
15 minutes left on this debate, and I ask a question here that when Muzaffarnagar was burning, how many politicians took a principled stand? Why was the army not sent it? Why was action not taken? Why was Uttar Pradesh bleeding? And where was the political class of this country? I'm taking a question from the gentleman in the black t-shirt. Go ahead.
The question has to do with the concept of marital rape. At the height of the protests after the Delhi gang rape, you guys were forced to make some amendments to the general laws regarding sexual violence. despite the fact that even as we speak, there are millions of women out there waiting and fearing for their lives when they return home, that they'll be beaten and raped by their husbands, and they have no legal recourse as of now. The indecency of being afraid of such a life is exceeded by the inhumanity of the political class to refuse to acknowledge that the fact that something called marital rape could exist. What is possibly your defense for keeping that out of the ambit?
Okay, who takes that? Someone wants to answer on this side? Why was there no consensus with the political class on something as basic as that? Okay, who wants to answer that? Harsimrat Kaur.
It's a tough one, what you're asking. But I would like to start off by saying that what about every 20 statistics that show that every 20 minutes there's a rape happening in a part of our country. So why restrict it to marital rape? Let's talk about rape that happens not each and every night. It doesn't happen with every woman. I'm talking about the rapes that happen every 20 minutes in our country, and the conviction rate. If you look at the statistics of last year, out of the 1 lakh that were reported, there's not even a 20% conviction. 80% went scoffing. Now we come back. Now I come to the point what you're saying about marital rape. Let's talk practical. Who's going to decide whether it was a rape or not? I don't know whether you're married or not, but I am. Today I'm bugged with my husband. I tomorrow turn around and say that he raped me. Where does the court? Is the court already not burdened with enough cases?
A broader point being made.
It needs to be thought out, and when you bring in the law must be such that it's implementable. Not just bring in a law which sounds really nice for the public. That's what we are tending to do.
Ms. Badal, what are we talking about?
Arnab, what we are tending to do is bring in laws to pacify the public. The law needs to be such that is implementable.
Can I have a word in? Otherwise, like Meera Kumar, I'll stand on my feet. Harsimrat Kaur Badal, a gentleman called Om Prakash Chautala, made a ridiculous and, if I may say, blasphemous suggestion that girls should be married off early to prevent rape. He was responding to a stupid suggestion by a Khap Panchayat in Haryana that girls should be married off early to prevent rapes. He said we should learn from the past, especially the Mughal era. People used to marry their girls early to save them from atrocities, and a currently similar situation is arising in the state. Why didn't all the political parties go on the streets against Om Prakash Chautala and say we boycott this party forever and ban them from politics unless that statement is apologized for?
I don't think it's for the political parties to go out to the streets and boycott. It's for his electorate to boycott his thinking process if they don't think it's right.
Why should we leave? You're tossing the... 15-second response.
When was the last time you had a protest against the kind of treatment that Soni Sori has got by the police? Why are we so insensitive to rape? We are very agitated when we see rapes in our capital. Why are we not equally agitated when we see rapes in the lower strata of our society? Okay, this is again a classic case of selective agitation.
He throws it back to society. We have two questions there. 1 second. We are going to take those two young ladies on one row and then I'll come to you in front. Yes.
My question is about, everyone here on this bench has been telling us to go out there, become part of the political process. I want to focus on the Kudankulam nuclear plant. Youth went out there and 55,000 FIRs were filed, 7,000 sedition cases. We are calling people enemies of the state for simply asking for alternate forms of energy. 40 and 15-year-olds are being called enemies of the state. Yeah. And you're telling us to go and participate?
Okay, good point. Good point.
Protest in Delhi against the sedition cases on 12-year-old children in Kudankulam. When was the last time our students, us, the middle class, what we call the youth today, responded to these? When was the last time we had a protest for POSCO in Delhi? When was the last time we agitated for it?
That's what I'm asking. Sahai is coming back into the debate and then I'm passing the mic to this side. Ashay wants to go in.
Ultimately, classes of society will respond and feel most affected by the issues that pertain to them. That doesn't change the fact... Let me speak. That doesn't change the fact that the political class that is answerable to them has failed to engage them. Irom Sharmila's own representatives haven't acknowledged her cause and there is no engagement over there, right? So that's where they fell. And ultimately, you talk about how we are voting for criminals, but we're completely ignoring constituencies like Pratapgarh, where Raja Bhaiya is the only person to vote for and there is virtually no opposition, right? Absolutely. So what do you do in those cases?
Well, I mean, Raja Bhaiya, interesting representative of society. Yes, please.
We are talking about the theory of representation, that he's representing his constituency. So my question is referring to the last week events of this ordinance. So why, when we see that in the every representative is speaking for his constituency, then why it take for the congressman that Mr. Rahul Gandhi to come on public and say this is wrong? Absolutely. So why
Mr. Pilot, you got the question.
Theory of representation is basically flawed because when they debate in parliament,
he got the question.
The whip is there. that yes, whether they have to speak in favor or oppose.
Let him reply to
it is basically flawed.
Let him reply to it.
I think there are 2 points. One is that in Parliament, there is a whip that the party line issues and everybody votes according to the party line. But within the party, there are discussions, and Mr. Rahul Gandhi is the vice president of the Congress party. Now, there were all sorts of questions raised, etc., but the political consensus at the time was to allow the ordinance to go through and have a law to change certain things. But Mr. Rahul Gandhi, after hearing, thinking, talking to congressmen and outside, made a very brave point, I think. And I think he was channelizing the public opinion by going out and saying, it takes a lot of effort to say something like that at the point that he did, to say that we must now take a step back and change what we've done. In a democracy, it's all about accepting what the people are wanting. The majority wanted the change to happen, and we were able to reflect that. I think it's a good thing. The end objective is achieved, and we should really now try and focus on how we can avoid these things from happening in the future.
But political leaders should also guide public opinion with their comments. It's good to be led by it, but they should also guide it. And I'm going to take a last, Yogendra Yadav as a counter. One last question from there, then we are closing it. Yes, Yogendra Yadav.
When was the last time Congress took any of its vice presidents so seriously? 1. 2. The whole problem is with this thing called political consensus. We are not debating Congress versus BJP here. What all these people sitting here and listening to this program suspect is that there is a consensus, there is a collusion, that all this political class has become a class unto itself, that parliament is being reduced into a trade union of politicians, that the most sacred house of this country is being used for self-defense of those who happen to be there.
Fayaz is responding to you.
Charge. Please respond. And Fawaz, when you expect every agitation for Adivasis and everything to happen in Delhi, are you not contradicting your own claims that unless something happens in Delhi, it doesn't represent the voice of the people? We are not discussing Delhi versus politicians. We are discussing people versus the political class here.
The only thing I expect is that we should also be sensitive to it. In the Delhi gang rape case, the 4 horrendous people who did that, before getting on the bus, they sodomized a fruit vendor. How many people even knew this? It was not highlighted by any parts of the media. It was just one fact-finding committee which said that, these are people. There are other cases also, even in that very same case, before getting on the bus, they sodomized a fruit vendor. Nobody's ever heard what happened to that fruit vendor. It's because my only problem is that we only stand up and agitate and make noise when we are hurt. It is this apathy.
What is the responsibility of political class that allows such a high level of delinquency in its society to go untouched and unnoticed?
See, when we become so selective, when we ask the political class to respond only to our grievances, only to something that affects us as a class or as our society, then that is when we filter them out. We filter out all the other voices.
Now we're very short on time, so I can't take too many counters out there. I'm not allowing any more counter questions. I let Kiran Bedi come in very briefly and then closing comments. Kiran Bedi.
What I've noticed is that many people in the political class start with politics. If they would start as if they would start as reformers, I think that's the key. If they would work with the community as youth and become as social reformers, and that naturally takes them to politics, I think that you would get better people in this country. Number 2, there is no 365-day code of conduct for politicians. There needs to be a 365-day code of conduct for politicians.
Why don't you join politics?
Sorry?
Why don't you join politics?
Did you ask me why did I join the Indian Police Service?
Is it relevant to join politics to change
No.
it?
Do I need to be told? Did somebody tell me that I joined the Indian Police Service? I don't need to be told equally why I don't join politics.
Equally good
because
question.
that's your personal choice.
No, the question I asked you is why don't good people join politics?
No, the point is these are very important No, very important. Profession is a lifetime work, and these have to be very carefully personal choices, and that's the key, so that you make right choices.
May I just request a loud round of applause for our youth participants first. This is the most engaged and interactive debate I've participated in for a long time. Shankar, I think we've heard all the voices out. One thing I take from this is that we have the willingness to listen. But for that, the youth have to have the willingness to make themselves heard. The more you speak up, the more there will be a response. All the major changes which have happened should not just be guided by the media. They have to be guided by public opinion. I think that's the story of the last few days and months, and I think that's the satisfaction I go away with this debate from. Shankar.
I think there's very little debate that the sense of this House today would be that yes, the political class has indeed failed the youth. The the degree to which they fail the youth, there might be a difference of opinion here. But I think there is also a sense in the House that the political class is not the only class which has failed the youth. The point that Yogendra was making, that the youth itself has also in some sense failed itself.
Well, I think
I think those are important thoughts to keep in mind as we.
Well, I think society is becoming more assertive, and youth are an integral part of it. I thank all our participants, each and every one of you, for coming here and participating. For those on this side, especially against the motion, well argued, and for those on this side, brilliantly put. For the youth, it gives me a great hope that today they will be vocal. And I hope that all the youth watching this youth debate, the first of our youth debates, will go away with the feeling that somewhere in those questions also is your voice. I'll see you once again soon on the next youth debate.